I'm a little surprised by the reaction to my Jarrett Hurd videos, the past couple videos I've done on him. So I've decided to do a part 2 to this particular video. Why Jermell Charlo beats Jarrett Hurd? Because I'm baffled by some of the comments I'm receiving about this people. I'm completely baffled. So I'm going to go through some of these comments and logically break down why I disagree with these people, because people are saying some pretty outlandish and in some cases outright ridiculous things that just don't make any sense to me. Now, before I do that, to just put all my cards on the table, I am not somebody who's seen all Jarrett Hurd's fights. I've only seen him fight three times, and one of them was against Erislandy Lara. The other one was against Austin Trout. I might have seen one of his earlier fights too. So I haven't seen all of Jarrett Hurd's fights, but from what I've seen of him so far, I can't see this guy beating Jermell Charlo if he fights the way he did against Lara and Trout. Just walking forward, slow as molasses, easy to hit. Just a massive, big, slow target. I can't see, if he fights that way against Charlo, I can't see him winning. I just can't see it. Now, let me go through some of these comments, alright? The people who say that I'm underestimating Jarrett Hurd. Right, this is a guy who says I'm underestimating Jarrett Hurd. Okay, now, this is someone who leaves a fairly decent comment. He says, I discredited Hurd before the Lara fight. I believe Lara would outbox him, etc., etc. Basically, the gist of this is that he sees it as a 50-50 fight if Jarrett Hurd fights Charlo, and he can see it being similar to the Lara fight where Charlo boxes, trades less than Lara did, but tires late. You know, he says by round 10 Charlo's facial expression will have changed and he'll be looking tired and beaten up, ready for the taking. Now, with the greatest of respect, and you know, this comment was written with respect. It's not like some of the insane comments, which I'll show you in a second. But with the greatest of respect, Erislandy Lara and Jermell Charlo are two completely different fighters with totally different attributes and totally different styles. So why you think it would go like the Lara fight, I'm not so sure. Because Jermell Charlo is much bigger than Erislandy Lara. He's much stronger. He's a much better combination puncher. I don't think he'll trade less on the inside than Lara. I think he'll trade more on the inside than Lara against Jarrett Hurd if he has to. I think he'll trade more. Why? Because he's much bigger and stronger than Lara. Since when was Lara a great inside fighter? Lara's not a great inside fighter. He can fight on the inside, but he's never been great at it. You don't think Erislandy Lara and say, oh, great inside game. No. He's not a great inside fighter. Jermell Charlo is going to do way more damage on the inside against Jarrett Hurd than Erislandy Lara did. Trust me on that one. Have you seen what happens to people when Jermell Charlo opens up on them when they stand right in front of him? Are you kidding me? Like, he's way more dangerous in the pocket than Erislandy Lara is. He's going to give Jarrett Hurd way more to think about offensively than Lara did up close. Lara is a much slicker fighter than Jermell Charlo. He's more experienced, he's more slippery. But Lara didn't really use that much slipperiness. He stayed in the pocket, blocked a lot of punches rather than using his legs to move away. And yet Lara had a lot of success on the inside against Jarrett Hurd in the first half of the fight especially. And I'm telling you now, Charlo is going to have way more success on the inside if he elects to fight on the inside against Hurd. He's going to have way more success than Lara did. Have you seen Charlo fight? No disrespect, but it's nothing like Erislandy Lara, he's way more formidable up close. Way more formidable. I did point these things out in my comment here. Anyway, let's go to some more comments. Andres Gomez says, well, he basically agrees with me. He sees Charlo winning the fight decisively. That's what I see. This individual, Mr. Plex, says Lara would beat Charlo. Hurd is the Wilder at middleweight. What an insane comparison, you know. Hurd is Wilder at middleweight, and two people have thumbs it up. I hope it's this guy with sock accounts thumbsing up his own comments, because I would hate to think that there are two other people that could be this demented to believe that Hurd is anything like Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder is tremendously fast for a man of his size, and he is a humongous puncher. Jarrett Hurd is nothing like Wilder. He's not as athletic as Wilder. He's slow for his weight, unlike Wilder. He's not a one-punch knockout artist like Wilder is. He's not good at long range like Wilder. People, that's one of the most ridiculous comparisons I've ever heard in my life, that Hurd is the Wilder at middleweight. Unbelievable. And saying Lara would beat Charlo, that I can give a bit more credence to, because styles make fights. Just because I would pick Charlo to beat Hurd in a heartbeat, it doesn't necessarily mean I would pick Charlo to beat Lara. Styles make fights, right? Lara's style is completely different to Jarrett Hurd's style, so let that be known. All right. So anyway, this individual's talking about Hurd has 3 belts. He beat Lara. He's undefeated. Again, 4 people here worryingly thumbsing it up. And I pointed out here, Hurd doesn't have 3 belts. He's got 2 belts. Nobody counts the IBO. And as an example, last year in 2017, Julius Ndongo was undefeated with 2 belts. And look what happened to him. You know, nothing I've seen of Hurd has impressed me so far. He's a big, strong guy who bullies shorter, older, weaker men. I've seen very little skill there at all. He's not a particularly big puncher. He's easy to hit and he's slow. You know, and this individual, Mr. Plex, is obsessed with the fact that Charlo didn't knock out Rosado 4 years ago. You know, and I'll get onto that. It's completely meaningless. You know, the fact that Charlo 4 years ago didn't knock somebody out. Rosado is a very tough guy, and Charlo has improved a lot since 4 years ago. You know, you look at Gennady Golovkin's record, alright? Gennady Golovkin went 8 rounds, the 8-round distance with Mehdi Bouadla. Back in 2007, he went a distance with Ian Gardner back in 2008. All right, he went a distance with Amar Amari back in 2008. He went 10 rounds with Kasim Umar in 2011. Now, does any of this matter now? No, because Gennady Golovkin has massively improved since then. Okay, and what I'm telling you is, Jermell Charlo is hitting harder now than he was 4 years ago, for one. Rosado was a very tough guy anyway, but Jermell Charlo's hitting harder now, and this individual, in one of his comments here, seems to believe that you can't improve punching power, that the punching power you turn professional with is the punching power you have for the rest of your career. Well, clearly this guy doesn't know anything about boxing. If he's saying nonsense like that, of course you can improve your punching power. And when you look at Jermell Charlo, you look at his style. He was boxing a lot more earlier on in his career, whereas now he's more offensive. So your technique can improve your punching power, but also the way you choose to fight. Most fighters have significantly less punching power when they're on the back foot than they do when they're coming forward on the front foot, or when they're in the middle of the ring planting their feet. Jermell Charlo, since he switched trainers, has become far more offensive. He's not boxing as much. and therefore he's getting more knockouts. Your skill can improve over the years, and the skill can help you land more clean power punches and therefore get more knockouts. So whatever the reason for Jermell Charlo's knockout ratio going up over the past couple years, clearly he's becoming a more precocious puncher than he was. Yeah, clearly, because he's been knocking people out for the past couple years. And people can talk about the people he's knocked out were chinny, this, that, and the other. Look, he was knocking out people with, very few knockout losses or very few losses. John Jackson was knocked out. Charles Hatley was knocked out. Erickson Lubin was undefeated. He was knocked out in 1 round. I think that Jermell Charlo's punching power has improved and his skill level has improved, and he's a hungry fighter. And look, here's the thing. I'm not saying that Jermell Charlo is the biggest puncher in the world. What I'm telling you is he doesn't need to be the biggest puncher in the world to defeat Jarrett Hurd. I think he's got more than enough skill and more than enough power to keep Jarrett Hurd honest. When I look at Hurd, he's a big, slow, lumbering guy. And yes, he managed to beat Lara by the skin of his teeth, by the way. That was a very, very close fight. An old, Erislandy Lara, who's a slick fighter, who doesn't normally fight on the inside, who doesn't normally like to exchange. Jarrett Hurd didn't use skill to beat Lara. He just, imposed himself upon him, took everything Lara could throw at him. He was basically a human punching bag for a lot of the rounds. And Lara just wore himself out hitting Jarrett Hurd. But again, Jermell Charlo is not Erislandy Lara. He's much stronger than Lara. Have you seen, I keep saying, have you seen what it looks like when Jermell Charlo opens up on people? Did you see Jermell Charlo opening up on Charles Hatley? Did you see that shit? People, and these are guys, all right? Erickson, Lubin, Hatley, Jackson, etc. These are guys who are not as big a targets and not as easy to hit as Jarrett Hurd. Jarrett Hurd is a massive, easy to hit target. You look at Jackson. Jackson actually tried to box against Jermell Charlo. So why people are bringing up the Jackson thing and saying, oh, he was behind on points against Jackson? Are you trying to tell me that Jarrett Hurd is going to box like Jackson? On the back foot, moving around? I mean, maybe he will, but if I'm being ignorant here, please show me the fights where Jarrett Hurd boxed on the back foot and showed he had a back foot game. Maybe he has a back foot game I'm unaware of. But all I'm telling you is, if he boxes the way he did against Lara or Trout, Jermell Charlo is going to light this man up like a Christmas tree. He's just a massive, easy to hit, slow target. I'm baffled here as to why people have such a problem with me picking Jermell Charlo to win this fight decisively. I just don't get it. I don't get it, people. Let's have a look at some more comments here. Alright, this guy says respectively, Hurd is better defensively than you think. His knockout of Tony Harrison was a beautiful, destructive slip and counter. I don't think I've seen that fight. I'll have to go look at it, to be fair. He's talking about punch percentages and all this business, and once again, all I can tell you is, and big up this guy, by the way. I don't know why the little avatars are not showing here, but big up this guy, by the way. A respectful comment, even if he disagrees with me. He says that Trout and Lara were not landing the normal percentage that they usually land. Well, I don't think that has anything to do with Jarrett Hurd's defense. Respectfully, I don't think it's got anything to do with Jarrett Hurd's defense. I think it's got to do with the fact that both of those guys, Trout and Lara, were under intense pressure. And because they were under intense pressure, they were thinking about defense as much as they were thinking about offense. So they were having to throw punches to try and keep the guy off rather than pick punches when they felt comfortable to pick punches like they normally would in fights. That's why their punch percentage, their connect ratio was down. But once again, Jermell Charlo is a much stronger, more ferocious, better combination puncher than Erislandy Lara or Austin Trout. He is. I don't know, part of me is thinking maybe it's just people thinking with their hearts rather than their heads. Maybe it's because the Charlo brothers are so arrogant and outspoken, and they are arrogant and outspoken, all right? They are very brash, egotistical, arrogant guys, very outspoken. Maybe this is the reason why people are thinking with their hearts and they're wishing that Jarrett Hurd will beat Jermell Charlo. Maybe they're thinking with their hearts and not their heads. I don't know. But yeah, let's read some more comments here. Okay, this guy's talking about Charlo defended against Austin Trout in June. Austin Trout, I think, from a technical point of view, will give Charlo far more problems than Jarrett Hurd. Like, way more problems. Trout is a good boxer. He's slick. He's experienced. I expect Charlo to win, don't get it twisted, just like his brother did. But I don't think it will necessarily be easy at all, Austin Trout is a much more difficult target than Jarrett Hurd is. Jarrett Hurd is way easier to hit. I just think stylistically, they say styles make fights. I think stylistically, Jarrett Hurd plays into Jermell Charlo's hands far more than Austin Trout would, and far more than Erislandy Lara would. So that's my thoughts on that. Big up Jacob. He says, I think Jermell's lack of knockouts came from his approach to boxing in his earlier days. He was actually quite defensive, and on the offense he was incomplete. Since joining Derek James and Errol Spence, he sharpened up a lot and the knockouts keep coming. I don't think his record does his punching power justice. I completely agree. 100% on that. Alright, this individual says Hurd will push Charlo harder than he has been pushed before. And again, I'm pointing out the styles. He says Jarrett wins fights. Even if he's slow and he has no technique, he wins fights. Who has Charlo beat? He could have fought Lara years ago. Well, Lara and Charlo were both trained by Ronnie Shields, which I pointed out in this comment. That's why they didn't fight each other. So I guess Heath showmate didn't realize that, or he forgot that. I don't know. But yeah, Charlo and Lara were both trained by Ronnie Shields. That's why they didn't fight. Had nothing to do with Charlo not stepping up or anything like that. And again, it's just a situation where people are neglecting to compare like for like. Oh, they're saying, Hurd did this to Lara and did this to Trout. Trout and Lara are nothing stylistically or physically like Jermell Charlo. They're not even anything like him personality-wise, and personality is important in boxing. And also age. Lara and Trout are two old veterans. And I know Lara's they're not particularly old. They're in their early 30s, Lara's in his mid-30s. But they've had a lot of tough fights. They've been there and done it. They don't have the hunger of a young, up-and-coming fighter like Charlo. They don't have the intensity, the ferocity. And they're boxers. They're not guys who can get in the pocket and mix it up and really hurt you. That's not who Lara and Trout are. So Hurd will be fighting a completely different kind of fighter in Jermell Charlo than he did in Trout and Lara. It's just a totally different kind of fighter stylistically, physically. in terms of attitude, it's just totally different. I don't get why so many people can't see this. Strange, strange. All right, George Milner says Hurd suggested post-fight that he'd box against Charlo rather than just plow forward. Not sure how that would go for him. Well, if he does decide to box against Charlo, I think that would be a very, very wise move. And again, maybe Hurd has got some boxing skills which I'm not aware of. Maybe I'm ignorant to Jarrett Hurd's boxing skills, because he certainly didn't show them against Trout or Lara. But if he does have them in the locker, then maybe he can give Charlo all kinds of problems. But again, I have to reiterate, if he fights the way he did against Lara and Trout, Charlo is going to light him up like a Christmas tree. That's what's going to happen. Jeez, people. This individual saying Hurd is bigger than Charlo. Oh, he might be a bit bigger, but I'm telling you that Charlo is a lot stronger and a lot bigger than Lara and Trout. So he will have the physical ability to be able to keep Hurd off of him far better than Lara and Trout did. That's what I'm telling you. He's much stronger than Lara and Trout, much more explosive on the inside, and he will be able to give Jarrett Hurd way more to think about than those two slick southpaws did, those two slick veteran southpaws. Mike Jones, I kind of have to agree. Hurd is just a big weight bully with no skills. I mean, Jean-Luc Devon, big up Jean-Luc, by the way, long time subscriber, big up. He says, I do get where you're coming from, but I think you're underestimating him a little. I think Charlo will have a very difficult time with this guy alone. Most of the middleweights out there, in my opinion, he's just a better version of the current Triple G. Alright. I'm not sure what he meant by that, but still. And also talking about the comparisons, right? Because some people tried to pull me up about the comparisons. Let me try and find out which guy it was here. There was a guy who said the comparisons I used were not accurate, because I said that Hurd reminds me of a cross, stylistically, he reminds me of a cross between Antonio Margarito and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. That's what he reminds me of stylistically. Now, there was somebody here who said that those comparisons were not accurate, and he gave some of his own comparisons, which, I mean, you you let me know what you think about his comparisons here, people. Frightening that 3 people have thumbs it up. Here's the comparison. He says Hurd throws way more punches than Margarito. Not the same kind of fighter at all. Hurd threw 800 punches against Lara. Chavez Jr. had trouble throwing 1 punch around against Canelo. I don't know how long you've been following boxing, bro, but you're struggling to understand the concepts of which I'm talking here. And as I wrote here, go watch Margarito versus Cotto if you want to see Margarito throwing a lot of punches. Go watch Margarito versus Martinez if you want to see him throwing a lot of punches. He throws a hell of a lot of punches in those fights. And I wrote here, Margarito is actually a more refined fighter than Jarrett Hurd. Hurd is more raw and relies on his size far more than Margarito did. Similar to Chavez Jr. at middleweight. Now this is where it gets crazy. Why did one person, I hope he thumbs up his own comment. I hope nobody can actually say, agree with something so bizarre. He says, you're right, they're both weight bullies, but I don't find their style similar. I also agree Margarito is more refined and skilled, but it's not just about skill. If I had to compare the style Hurd has, I'd compare it to Salido and Porter. He throws so many punches to even smother his own work. Now, respectfully, Alex Guerrero, I don't want to be disrespectful. You didn't come at me sideways, so no disrespect intended, but I'm baffled as to how particularly Sean Porter is anything like Jarrett Hurd. Sean Porter uses his legs Sean Porter has fast feet. He gets in and out. He's got pretty fast hands. Yes, he can get wild and he can smother fighters. But Sean Porter stylistically and in terms of athletical gifts is absolutely nothing like Jarrett Hurd. I mean, you couldn't find two fighters who are less alike. I mean, you probably could, but you know, there's a huge difference between Sean Porter and Jarrett Hurd stylistically. There's not even any similarity there at all. Porter is far more athletically gifted and he uses his athletic gifts. He boxes quite a lot, Sean Porter, and he mixes it up. He'll come forward for part of a round and he'll get on the back foot and mess you around and use his feet and feints. Jarrett Hurd doesn't fight anything like Sean Porter. And as far as Salido might be a little more similar to Jarrett Hurd, but Salido's more skilled than Hurd. And also, Salido doesn't rely on his weight and his size as much as Jarrett Hurd does. Salido's more skilled than Hurd. So yeah, the Salido comparison's a little more accurate, but it's still not, you know, anything like it. And that's why I put in my reply here, no, my comparisons of Margarito and Chavez Jr. were far more accurate. Jarrett Hurd is like a mix between Margarito and Chavez Jr. He's got the kind of punch output of a Margarito, the kind of work rate a Margarito had, the relentlessness, the toughness, potentially. But he's not as refined as Margarito. He's more crude, like Chavez Jr. You know, Chavez Jr. is not a guy who has or had a great work rate, okay? But he was a guy who, at middleweight, achieved a lot of things. He was middleweight champion, right? He beat good fighters. But he beat them by basically just bullying them with his sheer size and physicality. There was no skill involved. It was just a much bigger, stronger guy bearing down on these little, you know, much smaller, weaker guys. That's all Chavez Jr. did. Now, Hurd doesn't have the weight advantage over his opponents, which is anywhere near as big as Chavez Jr. had over his opponents. But it's a similar kind of situation stylistically, where Hurd is just so strong compared to the guys he's faced so far. But he's crude like Chavez Jr. in terms of his technique. He's quite crude. But he throws more punches than Chavez Jr. That's why I said he's like a cross between Margarito and Chavez Jr. stylistically. You know, yeah, that's my take on it, people. I'm very surprised that so many people have got an issue with me saying that I think Jermell Charlo beats Jarrett Hurd convincingly. Again, the only way I see Jarrett Hurd giving Jermell Charlo serious problems is if Jarrett Hurd has a back foot game, a long range game, which I'm not aware of. If he does, and if someone can direct me to a fight where he's displaying this, then maybe I'll change my mind. Because somebody there did say that Jarrett Hurd intends to box against Jermell Charlo rather than just go forward and apply pressure. So if he has the ability to box and he has a back foot game, or he has a long range game at least, then I might not be so confident picking Charlo over Hurd. But as it stands, based on what I've seen of Hurd, the way he fought against Lara, the way he fought against Trout, I cannot see that guy beating Jermell Charlo. I just can't see it. So anyway, people, bit of a long one, but I had a lot to explain. So yeah, drop your comments in the comment section. It's Hatman, I'm out.